What is the price of betrayal? For Sebastian Thorne, a man who had everything, it was a price he never thought he'd have to pay. On a sun-drenched afternoon, in a cathedral filled with New York's elite, he stood at the altar and made a choice. He shattered the heart of his sweet, unassuming fiancée, Lena, for a woman who promised him the world. He chose ambition. He chose power. But in the most spectacular twist of fate, Sebastian was about to learn he had just thrown away the keys to an empire beyond his wildest dreams. He didn't just leave a woman at the altar. He abandoned the real heiress. This is the story of how the quiet girl he discarded came back to claim her throne and exact the most devastating revenge imaginable. The light filtering through the stained glass windows of St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue was by all accounts angelic. It painted kaleidoscopic patterns on the marble floors and across the faces of New York's high society, a veritable who's who of finance, art, and old money. The air was thick with the scent of 1,000 white lilies and the low, expectant hum of a crowd waiting for a fairy tale to conclude. At the center of it all stood Lena Vance, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. In a simple yet breathtakingly elegant Vera Wang gown, she felt like an imposter. She was a librarian, an archivist from NYU, with a passion for dusty first editions and the quiet solitude of history. How had she ended up here, about to marry Sebastian Thorne, the city's most formidable real estate magnate? She looked at him, standing all and impossibly handsome in his Tom Ford tuxedo. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, held a universe of ambition. For 2 years, he had been her world. He'd found her charming, a refreshing escape from the piranha-infested waters he swam in daily. He loved her quiet intelligence, her kindness, the way she wasn't impressed by his billions, but by the stories he told of his childhood. Or so she thought. The organ music swelled a majestic piece by Bach that seemed to shake the very foundations of the cathedral. This was it. The officiant, a bishop whose attendance was a testament to Sebastian's influence, smiled benevolently. "Do you, Sebastian Alexander Thorne," the bishop began, his voice echoing in the cavernous space, "take this woman, Lena Vance, to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part." A beat of silence. Then another. The expectant hum of the crowd faltered, replaced by a tense, electric stillness. Lena's smile trembled at the edges. She saw a flicker of something in Sebastian's eyes. Not love, not nervousness, but a cold, hard calculation. He cleared his throat. He turned his gaze from the bishop to her, and the warmth she had come to cherish was gone, replaced by an Arctic frost. "I can't," he said. The 2 words were quiet, yet they detonated in the silence like a bomb. A collective gasp rippled through the pews. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. Her bouquet of peonies and lily-of-the-valley suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "Sebastian, what are you saying?" She whispered, her voice a fragile thread. He wouldn't meet her eyes fully. He stared at a point just past her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Lena. I truly am. But I can't do this." He took a half-step back, a physical severing of their connection. This was a mistake. Suddenly a figure emerged from the front pew. Isabella Rossi, in a blood-red dress that was a scandal in itself, glided towards the altar. Isabella was Sebastian's head of public relations, a woman as sharp and polished as a shard of obsidian. She was everything Lena wasn't: aggressive, overtly sensual, and dripping with the kind of ambition that left bodies in its wake. She placed a perfectly manicured hand on Sebastian's arm. "It's all right, Sebastian," Isabella murmured, her voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear. "You're making the right choice, the strong choice." The puzzle pieces slammed into place in Lena's mind, each one a fresh wave of agony. The late nights at the office, the whispered phone calls, the scent of a strange, expensive perfume on his jacket. It wasn't work, it was her. Sebastian looked from Isabella's triumphant smirk back to Lena's shattered face. "Isabella, she understands my world, what it takes. She offers a future, a partnership that can build an empire. You offer comfort, Lena, and comfort doesn't close deals on skyscrapers." And the cruelty of his words was breathtaking. He was reducing their love, their life together, into a business liability. He was liquidating her right here in front of the world. The flashes of cameras began a predatory storm of light as the press, smelling blood, abandoned all pretense of decorum. Lena stood frozen, the world tilting on its axis. She felt hundreds of pairs of eyes on her, some pitiful, some scornful, all judging. She could feel the headline already forming as "Tycoon Dumps Librarian at Altar for Vixen Exec." Her humiliation was to be tomorrow's gossip column fodder. But then something shifted within her. Deep beneath the shock and the heartbreak, a core of steel long dormant began to glow. It was the legacy of her grandfather, a man who had built an empire from nothing and had taught her that dignity was the one thing no one could take from you unless you gave it away. She did not cry. She did not scream. She lifted her chin, her eyes locking onto Sebastian's for one final searing moment. She let him see the pain he had caused, but she also let him see that he had not and could not break her. She turned to her maid of honor, her best friend, Chloe, whose face was a mask of furious disbelief. "Chloe, my wrap, please." With a steady hand, Lena took the silk wrap and draped it over her shoulders. Then she turned to the crowd, her posture unnaturally straight. An elderly, distinguished-looking man with kind eyes and a grim face was already moving towards the aisle. It was Mr. Davies, her family's longtime confidant and lawyer. He reached her side, offering a silent, sturdy arm. Without a single word to Sebastian or Isabella, Lena Vance, the jilted bride, walked away from the altar. The sound of her heels clicking on the marble floor was the only sound in the cathedral, a crisp, defiant rhythm against the cacophony of whispers and camera shutters. She was walking away from Sebastian Thorne, but as the heavy oak doors closed behind her, everyone would soon learn she was walking towards her destiny. And Sebastian Thorne had just made the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of his life. The black Bentley purred through the gates of a sprawling estate in Westchester County, a world away from the media circus engulfing Manhattan. The property was a fortress of old-world elegance, shielded from prying eyes by a dense forest of ancient oaks and a formidable stone wall. This was Sterling Manor, a place that hadn't appeared in society pages for over 2 decades. This was Lena's real home. Mr. Davies escorted her into the grand library, a 2-story rotunda, where the scent of aged paper and lemon oil polish was a balm to her frayed soul. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow on the thousands of leather-bound books that lined the walls. Sitting in a high-backed armchair by the fire was Alistair Sterling, his face a roadmap of his 92 years. His eyes, though clouded with age, were as sharp and perceptive as ever. He was the patriarch, the titan behind Sterling Holdings, a multinational conglomerate with interests in everything from legacy media and sustainable technology to pharmaceuticals and, ironically, prime real estate. He was a legend, a ghost in the machine of global finance, and he was Lena's grandfather. He watched her as she entered, his expression a mixture of profound sadness and steely resolve. He didn't stand, but he opened his arms. Lena went to him, collapsing into his embrace, the facade of strength she had maintained in the cathedral finally crumbling. The tears came hot and silent. "He made his choice, my dear," Alistair said, his voice a low rumble. "And in doing so, he failed the test." Lena pulled back, wiping her eyes. "The test, grandfather. This was my life, my heart. It wasn't a game." "Everything is a game when a fortune of this magnitude is involved," he countered, gently but firmly. "I had to know. I had to be sure the man you married loved Lena Vance, the brilliant, kind-hearted book lover, not Lena Sterling, the heiress to a dynasty. I set a simple trap. I made it known through back channels that Sterling Holdings was looking for a new CEO from outside the family, that my sole heir was a simple girl with no interest in the business. It was bait. I wanted to see if Sebastian Thorne, a man obsessed with building his own empire, could truly love a woman he believed could add nothing to it. Today, we received our answer." The truth of it settled over Lena, a cold, clarifying weight. Her entire relationship had been the final stage of a decades-long plan to protect both her and the family legacy. Sebastian wasn't just unloving, he was unworthy. "So what now?" she asked, her voice gaining a sliver of its strength back. Alistair gestured to a large mahogany desk. On it lay a single, weighty portfolio bound in dark blue leather. "Now," he said, a glint in his eye, "you stop being Lena Vance. It is time for you to become who you were always meant to be." Mr. Davies stepped forward and opened the portfolio. Inside were documents, proxy statements, and a letter. It was Alistair's official abdication. He was stepping down as chairman of the board of Sterling Holdings and transferring his controlling interest, 51% of the company, to her, effective immediately. Lena stared at the documents, her name printed in stark black ink, Lena Sterling. "Me," she breathed. "Grandfather. I'm an archivist. I know about 14th century manuscripts, not corporate takeovers." "Nonsense," Alistair scoffed. "You have the finest mind of anyone I know. You see patterns, you understand history, and business is merely history in the making. You have my blood in your veins, and Mr. Davies and our board will guide you. You will learn faster than you can imagine. Your first order of business, however, is personal." He pointed to a smaller file next to the portfolio. It was a dossier on Thorne Global Properties. "Sebastian Thorne believes he is a king," Alistair said, his voice turning to ice. "His entire empire is built on leverage and aggressive expansion. His flagship project, the Elysian Tower, is the cornerstone of his future. He has poured every ounce of his capital and reputation into it. But the project and his company has a vulnerability, a single point of failure." Mr. Davies opened the file. It was a property deed. "Thorne has acquired all the land for his project, except for one small, crucial parcel right in the center," the lawyer explained. "A historic, landmarked building. The city council has refused to let him demolish it. He has been trying to buy it for a year from its reclusive owner, a shell corporation based in Switzerland. He believes he is close to a deal." Lena looked from the deed to her grandfather, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Don't tell me." Alistair Sterling smiled, a rare and predatory sight. "That shell corporation is of course owned by Sterling Holdings. The deed to that building, my dear, is now yours. Sebastian Thorne's grand Elysian Tower cannot be built without your permission. His future is quite literally in your hands." Meanwhile, back in Manhattan, Sebastian and Isabella were celebrating at the Glass House, a private rooftop club overlooking Central Park. Champagne flowed as they toasted to their new future. "To us," Sebastian said, clinking his glass against hers. "To building something real, something that matters." "We shed your dead weight today, darling," Isabella purred, running a finger down his tie. "That mousy librarian was holding you back. You need a queen, not a kitten. Now with our combined strength, no one can stop us. What's the first move?" Sebastian's phone buzzed. It was a frantic text. Text from his chief operating officer. "Sebastian, we have a major problem. The deal for the Oakhaven building just fell through. The sellers pulled out. Worse, we just received a notice. The entire parcel was sold this morning to a new buyer." Sebastian frowned. "That's impossible. We were days away from closing." He quickly typed back, who bought it. The reply came a moment later, and Sebastian's blood ran cold. "A company we've never dealt with before. Sterling Holdings." Isabella read the text over his shoulder, her brow furrowing. "Sterling. I thought the old man Alistair was a recluse. They haven't made an aggressive real estate play in 30 years. Why now? Why that building?" Sebastian felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. It had to be a coincidence. A bizarre, terribly timed coincidence. It couldn't be anything more. He had just discarded Lena Vance. The name Sterling was just a ghost, a phantom from the city's past. He had no idea that the ghost had just woken up. And in a library in Westchester, a woman he had called Comfort was now studying the blueprints of his empire, preparing to dismantle it, piece by agonizing piece. The game had begun. 3 days later, the name on the lips of every power player in New York was Lena Sterling. She had made her entrance not at a gala or a charity ball, but on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The article was a masterstroke of public relations, orchestrated by Sterling Holdings' veteran communications team. It featured a stunning portrait of Lena, no longer the soft, unassuming librarian, but a woman of formidable presence. Dressed in a tailored Armani suit, the color of midnight, her hair styled in a sleek, powerful cut. She stared out from the photograph with her grandfather's intelligent, unyielding eyes. The headline was simple and devastating. The Sterling Succession. Alistair Sterling Seedies, control of multi-billion-dollar empire to granddaughter Lena Sterling. The story detailed her quiet life as Lena Vance, and framed it not as a deception, but as a period of deliberate observation, a princess living amongst the people to understand the world she was destined to influence. It mentioned her academic credentials, her intelligence, and her deep respect for the Sterling legacy. There was no mention of Sebastian Thorne. There didn't need to be. The society pages connecting the dots with rabid glee did that for her. The jilted bride wasn't a charity case. She was a monarch who had just been handed her crown. In his penthouse office with panoramic views of the city he planned to conquer, Sebastian Thorne stared at the newspaper, a feeling of vertigo washing over him. "It can't be," he muttered, the paper trembling in his hand. "It's a trick. A different Lena Sterling, Isabella pacing the room like a caged panther, snatched the paper from him. "Don't be a fool, Sebastian. Look at her." It's her. The hair is different, the clothes are different, but the eyes are the same. She threw the paper onto his desk. "My God, you didn't just dump her. You publicly humiliated the sole heiress to one of the largest private fortunes on the continent. You picked a fight with a ghost, and the ghost turned out to be a goddess with a 9-figure credit line." The phone on Sebastian's desk rang shrill and insistent. It was his banker from Goldman Sachs. "Sebastian," the voice on the other end said, stripped of its usual congeniality. "We need to talk about the financing for the Elysian. Given the new developments regarding the Oakhaven parcel, the board is getting nervous. The stability of the project is in question. We need assurances." Before Sebastian could formulate a reply, another call came in. It was a key investor from Dubai, pulling his 9-figure commitment. The news was out. Thorn Global's flagship project was dead in the water, held hostage by the very woman its CEO had cast aside. Sebastian felt a cold sweat prickle his skin. This wasn't just a personal embarrassment. It was a corporate catastrophe. His reputation was built on his unerring instinct, his Midas touch. Now he looked like the world's biggest idiot. "Get me a meeting with her," Sebastian snarled at Isabella. "Now. Use every contact you have. I need to get in a room with her. I can fix this. I can reason with her." "Reason with her?" Isabella laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Sebastian, you told her she wasn't good enough to be your wife. You think she's going to sell you a building out of the goodness of her heart. This isn't a business negotiation anymore. This is a blood sport." But Isabella, ever the operator, made the calls. The answer that came back was swift and chilling. "Sterling is not available. All inquiries regarding the property at 24 Oak Street are to be directed to her legal team." No further comment. The message was clear. There would be no backroom deals, no personal appeals. This would be handled by the book through layers of lawyers and corporate procedure designed to bleed him dry. Lena, meanwhile, was holding her first official board meeting in the top-floor conference room of the Sterling Tower. The room was intimidating, a sleek expanse of glass and steel overlooking Central Park. But Lena felt surprisingly calm. She had spent the last 72 hours in a pressure cooker of briefings with Mr. Davies, absorbing decades of corporate history, strategy, and finance. Her archivist's mind, trained to find and connect disparate pieces of information, took to it with astonishing speed. She sat at the head of the table, the same spot her grandfather had occupied for 50 years. The board members, a collection of seasoned, silver-haired executives who had been skeptical at first, now watched her with a newfound respect. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Our first agenda item is Project Nightingale." This was her own name for the operation concerning Sebastian Thorn. "Thorn Global has made a preliminary offer of $200 million for the Oakhaven building," Mr. Davies reported. "That's already $50 million over market value. He's desperate." "Reject it," Lena said without hesitation. A board member, a gruff man named Marcus Thorn, no relation to Sebastian, a fact that had caused endless confusion, raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Sterling, respectfully, it's an incredible offer. We could make a significant profit." "Profit is not the primary objective here, Marcus," Lena stated calmly. "The objective is leverage. The Oakhaven building is a registered historical landmark. It was designed by my great-grandmother, an accomplished architect in her own right. We are not selling it. We are not demolishing it. We are going to restore it." She slid a new set of blueprints across the table. "I have commissioned the world's leading historical preservation architects. We are going to turn the Oakhaven building into the new global headquarters for the Sterling Arts Foundation. It will be a museum, a gallery, and a center for cultural preservation. We will break ground in 1 month. The board was silent, stunned by the audacity of the move. She wasn't just blocking Sebastian. She was building a monument to everything he had tried to destroy, right in the heart of his fallen dream. It was a strategic masterclass in humiliation. It told the world, "You wanted to build a monument to greed. I will build one to culture and legacy on its ashes." The move will generate immense public goodwill. Lena continued, her voice gaining momentum. It positions Sterling Holdings as a protector of heritage, not a destroyer of it. The tax implications are highly favorable, and the long-term value to our brand is immeasurable. Any questions? There were none. For the first time, the board saw not just Alistair's granddaughter, but a leader in her own right. A Sterling through and through. The news broke that afternoon. It wasn't an attack. It was a press release about a glorious new philanthropic venture. But for Sebastian Thorne, it was a declaration of war. He watched the report on a giant screen in his office, Isabella standing silently beside him. They showed renderings of the beautifully restored Oakhaven building, a jewel of classic architecture, and then they showed the plot map with the gaping, useless hole around it, where the Elysian Tower was meant to be. "She's not just blocking me," Sebastian said, his voice dangerously low. "She's mocking me. She's turning my biggest dream into her personal passion project." He slammed his fist on his desk, the force of it rattling a glass of water. "Fine. She wants a war. She'll get one. There are other ways to bring an opponent to their knees than through real estate." He looked at Isabella, his eyes burning with a new dark fire. "I want you to dig. I want to know everything about her. Every friend, every ex-boyfriend, every secret. No one lives a life that clean. Find me a weapon. Find me some dirt. If I can't attack her fortress, I'll attack her character. I'll drag the Sterling name through the mud until she begs me to stop." Isabella smiled, a slow, wicked curve of her lips. This she understood. This was her kind of fight. "Consider it done, darling. Her fairy tale is about to turn into a nightmare." The battle shifted from the boardrooms of Wall Street to the shadowy alleys of public opinion. Isabella Rossi, in her element, mobilized her network of journalists, gossip bloggers, and social media influencers. The campaign was insidious, a slow drip poison designed to erode Lena's carefully constructed image. It began subtly. An anonymous source in a tabloid column wondered if Lena's quiet life was actually a sign of instability, a period spent recovering in a discreet European clinic. A society blog posted unearthed photos of Lena from her college days, perfectly normal photos of her at a party holding a red plastic cup. But the captions hinted at a wild past she was desperate to hide. Then the attacks grew more personal and more vicious. They targeted her competence. An inside source at Sterling Holdings leaked a fabricated story to a financial news outlet, suggesting Lena was in over her head, a puppet for the old guard board members, and that her recent philanthropic venture was a reckless vanity project that was costing shareholders a fortune. Lena felt the sting of every article, every whisper. She had expected a business fight, a war of numbers and contracts. This was different. This was an assault on her identity. "They're painting me as either crazy stupid or a fraud," she said during a late-night strategy session with Mr. Davies and her new head of security, a former MI6 agent named Kincaid. "Every move we make, they twist into a weakness." "This is Isabella Rossi's signature," Kincaid said, his tone grim. He had compiled a thick dossier on her. She doesn't fight the facts. She manufactures a more appealing fiction. She creates doubt, and in the court of public opinion, doubt is as good as guilt. So how do we fight back? Lena asked, frustration lacing her voice. Do we release statements denying every lie we'll look defensive? No. Mr. Davies advised his calm, a steadying anchor. We do not engage on her turf. We do not sling mud. Your grandfather's rule was simple. Never wrestle with a pig. You get dirty, and besides, the pig likes it. We continue our strategy, and we launch a counter-offensive of our own. But ours will be based on the truth. The Sterling counter-offensive was a quiet storm. Their legal team began filing defamation lawsuits, not with loud press conferences, but with quiet, methodical precision that sent a chill through the media outlets publishing Isabella's stories. The message was clear: if you print a lie about Sterling, you will be held accountable in a court of law. Several smaller blogs retracted their stories immediately. Simultaneously, Lena's communications team launched a series of features on the real Lena Sterling. They didn't deny the old photos. They celebrated them in a feature for Vogue titled From Campus to CEO, framing her as a relatable modern woman. They didn't hide her past as a librarian. They highlighted it, running a segment on a major news network about how her skills as an archivist, finding value seeing patterns, preserving history, made her uniquely qualified to lead a legacy company like Sterling. While Isabella was fighting a war of shadows, Lena was building an empire of light. Sebastian, however, was growing impatient. The smear campaign wasn't working fast enough. His project was stalled, his investors were fleeing, and every day the magnificent Oakhaven building, now draped in scaffolding, bearing the Sterling crest, was a reminder of his powerlessness. This is taking too long, he raged at Isabella in his office. Her reputation is barely scratched, and my empire is bleeding out. I need something bigger, something that will cripple her. I'm working on it. Isabella snapped back, the strain beginning to show on her. But she's clean, Sebastian, annoyingly clean. Her life is an open book, and the book is boring. There's nothing here. Then find something that isn't in the book, he roared. Everyone has a secret, a past lover, a family scandal. What about her parents? They died when she was young, right? Car crash. Are we sure? Isabella's eyes lit up with a cruel spark. That is an interesting question. The new line of attack was monstrous. A notorious conspiracy blogger, funded by an anonymous source, published a lengthy post titled The Sterling Tragedy Accident or Assassination. It was a vile piece of fiction weaving a tale that suggested Alistair Sterling might have had a hand in his own son's death to maintain control of the company, and that Lena's secluded upbringing was a way to keep her quiet. The moment the story broke, Lena knew a line had been crossed. This wasn't about business or revenge anymore. This was about the desecration of her parents' memory. She was in her grandfather's study when she read it, the words on the screen, blurring through a film of furious tears. Alistair, reading over her shoulder, grew deathly still. The air in the room turned frigid. For the first time, Lena saw a look on his face she had never seen before, pure, unadulterated rage. He has gone too far, Alistair said, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. He has reached into my family's sacred ground and tried to poison it. He has mistaken my restraint for weakness. He looked at Lena, his eyes blazing. The time for leverage is over. The time for defense is over. Now we ruin him. He picked up the phone. Kincaid, get in here and bring me the red file. Mr. Davies, who was also in the room, paled slightly. Alistair, are you sure we agreed that was a weapon of last resort? He targeted my dead son, Alistair bit out. This is the last resort. Kincaid entered, holding a slim, crimson-colored portfolio. It contained the results of the deep-dive background check Sterling's security team had conducted on Sebastian Thorne when he first started dating Lena. It was standard procedure for the family, a way to vet anyone who got too close. Most files were thin. Sebastian's was not. Sebastian Thorne didn't build his first building with a bank loan and a dream, as his official story goes. Kincaid began opening the file. His seed money came from a man named Viktor Rykov, an oligarch with deep documented ties to organized crime. The money was dirty. We have the wire transfer records routed through a series of shell companies in the Cayman Islands. He continued, furthermore, his company has a pattern of acquiring properties through aggressive, often predatory means. For his Soho Tower project 5 years ago, a series of accidental fires broke out in the rent-controlled apartment buildings on the plot he needed forcing the tenants out. The fire marshal's report was inconclusive, but one of Thorne's junior executives was paid a substantial bonus a week later. The executive now lives in a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. The room was silent. This wasn't just dirt. This was potential criminal activity. Arson, money laundering. We held this back, Mr. Davies said quietly, because exposing it would trigger federal investigations and hurt a lot of innocent employees at Thorne Global. His concern for my innocent employees was zero when he publicly humiliated me. Lena said, her voice hard as diamond. The tears were gone, replaced by glacial fury. His concern was zero when he slandered my dead parents. He has forfeited any right to my mercy. She looked at her grandfather. He gave a single sharp nod. Kincaid, Lena commanded, her voice ringing with newfound authority. You are not to leak this to a gossip blog. You are to compile a full evidence-backed report. We are sending it to 2 places. She paused, taking a deep breath. This was the point of no return. The Department of Justice, she said, and the front page of the New York Times. The New York Times story broke on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't buried in the business section. It was the lead story above the fold, with a headline that hit the financial world like a seismic charge. Thorne's shadows. Investigation reveals tycoons' ties to organized crime. Allegations of arson and financial fraud. The article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, meticulously documented and corroborated by banking records, sworn affidavits, and off-the-record confirmations from sources deep within the justice system. It laid out the dirty origins of Sebastian's seed money from Viktor Rykov and presented a damning timeline of the accidental fires that cleared the way for his Soho project. The implication was clear and unavoidable. Sebastian Thorne's empire was built on a foundation of criminality. The fallout was instantaneous and apocalyptic. By 9:31 a.m., just 1 minute after the opening bell trading on Thorne Global Properties stock, TGP was halted as its value plummeted by 70% in a torrent of panic selling. By 10:00 a.m., federal agents from the FBI and the SEC were streaming into TGP headquarters with warrants seizing computers' servers and boxes upon boxes of files. The images of grim-faced agents carrying out the heart of his company were broadcast on a live feed on every major news network. Sebastian watched it all from his penthouse apartment, the TV screen reflecting in his stunned, disbelieving eyes. The red file. He knew instinctively that this was Lena's doing. This wasn't a smear campaign of whispers and innuendo. This was a public execution with a guillotine made of facts. His phone, which had been ringing incessantly, fell silent. His powerful friends, his investors, his bankers, they weren't calling to offer support. They were running for cover, severing all ties to a man who had just become radioactive. Isabella was there, her face ashen, her usual composure completely gone. She was frantically packing a suitcase. "What are you doing?" Sebastian asked, his voice hollow. "What does it look like I'm doing? I'm getting out," she said, not even looking at him as she threw designer dresses and shoes into her luggage. "This is over, Sebastian. You're finished. The company is finished." "We can fight this," he said, a desperate edge to his voice. "You're a PR genius. You can spin this." She finally stopped and turned to him, her face a mask of contempt. "Spin this. Spin a federal racketeering investigation. Are you insane? I'm a PR executive, Sebastian, not a miracle worker. My job is to polish gems, not turds. And right now you are the biggest, most toxic turd in New York City." "But us," he stammered. "Our future. The empire we were going to build." Isabella let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "Our future. I hitched my wagon to what I thought was a rocket ship. It turns out it was a torpedo aimed at the ground. You brought this on yourself. You poked the bear, no, you poked the goddess, and she tore you to shreds. And I will not be dragged down into the rubble with you." She zipped her suitcase shut. "My name was on the PR retainers, not the loan agreements with mobsters. My lawyers are already drafting a statement attesting to my complete and total ignorance of your extracurricular fundraising. Goodbye, Sebastian." She walked out without a backward glance, leaving him alone in the silent, opulent apartment that now felt like a tomb. The empire was gone. The woman he'd chosen for her ambition had abandoned him the moment that ambition became untenable. All he was left with were the ghosts of his own choices, and the memory of Lena. In the crushing silence, his mind for the first time in years was clear of the noise of ambition and greed. He started to remember things. Not the grand gestures, but the small, quiet moments with Lena. The way she'd smile when she found a rare book. How she would make him hot tea when he came home exhausted, not asking about his deals, but about his day. He remembered their walk through Central Park, in the autumn her hand in his, and how for a few hours he hadn't felt like Sebastian Thorne the tycoon, but just Sebastian, a man in love. He had called it comfort and dismissed it as a liability. Now in the wreckage of his life, he realized that comfort, that unconditional acceptance, was the only real thing he had ever possessed. He had traded a treasure for a trinket, and the trinket had turned to dust in his hands. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, depositions, and public shame. His assets were frozen. His company was being dismantled by receivers. The Elysian Tower project was officially declared dead, its vacant lot a monument to his hubris. The name Thorne, once a symbol of success, was now a byword for scandal. One evening broke, and broken he found himself standing across the street from the Oakhaven building. The scaffolding was down. The building was magnificent, restored to its former glory, its beautiful Beaux-Arts facade glowing under the warm evening lights. A banner hung above the entrance. The Sterling Vance Center for Cultural Heritage, opening soon. Sterling Vance. She had included her undercover name, the name he had known her by. It felt like a deliberate, final twist of the knife. It was a message meant only for him. I am still the woman you knew. I am still the woman you threw away. And this monument to my legacy is also a monument to your failure." He knew what he had to do. He had lost his company, his money, and his reputation. The only thing he had left to lose was his pride, and he realized it was worthless anyway. He had to see her. He had to face her one last time. The world shrinks when you lose everything. For Sebastian Thorne, it had collapsed to the size of a single city block, the one dominated by the imposing glass and steel edifice of the Sterling Tower. Getting a meeting with Lena Sterling was now harder than getting an audience with the Pope. His calls, once patched through to the most powerful people on earth, were now met with polite, impenetrable receptionists. His emails vanished into a digital abyss, likely filtered into a spam folder labeled "Disgraced Tycoons." He was a pariah, a ghost haunting the edges of a world that had violently ejected him. The walls of the Sterling Empire were seamless and absolute. So he waited. It was all he had left to do. Stripped of his purpose, this vigil became his new pathetic occupation. He stood on the sidewalk opposite the tower's entrance, a man who once owned skylines, now reduced to studying the comings and goings of a single building. The press in the first couple of days had been relentless. They took photos of him, a pathetic, hollowed-out figure in a wrinkled suit, his once commanding presence replaced by a haunted, desperate air. He didn't care. Humiliation was his new reality, a garment he wore as constantly as his own skin. After the third day, the reporters lost interest, moving on to the next scandal. He was left alone with the city's indifferent crowds. People bustled past him, a river of ambition and purpose, none of them giving a second glance to the man who was once a titan among them. He watched reflections in the shop windows, not his own, which he couldn't bear to face, but the reflection of the tower. He watched the sun glint off its highest floors, the floors where she was orchestrating a world that no longer had a place for him. It was late on the third afternoon when it happened. A sleek black Bentley, silent as a shadow, pulled away from the tower's private exit. Sebastian's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew it was her car. He had bought it for her as a birthday gift, a lifetime ago. He stepped forward, not aggressively but with a defeated slump to his shoulders, his eyes fixed on the tinted rear window. For a long, agonizing moment, the car continued to move. He felt a familiar wave of despair wash over him. Of course. Why would she stop? Then, unbelievably, the brake lights glowed. The car glided to a halt. Through the dark glass, he could just make out her silhouette. He saw her head turn slightly. Then, with a subtle nod to her driver, the rear door clicked open. It wasn't a welcome. It was a summons, an invitation into the lion's den. He scrambled across the street, his legs unsteady. He slid into the opulent interior, and the door closed with a soft, definitive thud, sealing him inside. The silence was immediate and crushing, a physical weight that pressed down on him. The city's noise vanished, replaced by a stillness heavier than any conversation. The interior smelled of expensive leather, and Lena's faint, clean scent jasmine and old paper. The scent that had once meant home now triggered a deep, profound ache in the hollow of his chest. She didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead, her profile etched against the window as the car began to move silently through the city traffic. "You wanted to see me, Sebastian," she said, her voice a calm, level instrument. It was not angry, not triumphant, not even sad. It was chillingly neutral, the voice of a CEO addressing a minor, unscheduled inconvenience. "You have 5 minutes." The words, so devoid of emotion, were more cutting than any scream would have been. He swallowed, trying to find his voice. "Lena, he began, but his own name for her sounded foreign and wrong in his mouth. His voice cracked, and he had to start again. "I am so sorry. For everything. What I did at the altar, it was unforgivable. I know that. I was a fool. A blind, arrogant, pathetic fool." She remained silent, her posture perfect, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Her stillness was unnerving. It offered him no anger to fight against, no sadness to appeal to. It was a void. He forged ahead, the words spilling out of him in a desperate, clumsy torrent. "I spent my whole life chasing a version of success that didn't exist. A phantom. I thought power was about acquiring things, buildings, companies, influence. I thought love was a transaction, a merger, a partnership that had to have a clear return on investment." He finally risked a glance at her. Her profile was like a cameo carved from ivory, beautiful and impossibly remote. Isabella. She wasn't the cause. She was a symptom. She was a reflection of my own worst impulses, the ugliest parts of my ambition. Choosing her was like choosing a part of myself I thought I needed to win. He saw a muscle flicker in her jaw, the only sign she was even listening. "I see it now," he said, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. The polished veneer of the tycoon was gone, flayed away to reveal the broken man underneath. "I see what I threw away. It wasn't about the money, Lena. I swear to you. If I had known about your family, your name, it wouldn't have mattered, because I was too blind to see the real value right in front of me. What I threw away was you, your kindness, your quiet strength, the way you saw me, not my net worth. I had everything that mattered in you, and I was too stupid to realize it." He finally broke the weight of his regret, crushing the air from his lungs. His shoulders slumped, and he covered his face with his hands. "I've lost everything. My company, my reputation, and I deserve it. I deserve all of it. I'm not here to ask for the building back. I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm just here to say, I'm sorry. And that I loved you. I really did. I was just too broken to know what to do with it." The car came to a smooth, silent stop. Sebastian looked up, disoriented. They were outside a small, unassuming building in Greenwich Village. For a heart-stopping second, he didn't recognize it. Then it hit him. It was the library. Her old library. Lena finally turned her head and looked at him, her gaze direct and unyielding. Her eyes were clear, steady, and held no trace of the adoring woman he had left at the altar. The warmth was gone, replaced by a hard, brilliant clarity. "You say it wasn't about the money, Sebastian," she said, her voice soft but laced with steel. "But your actions say otherwise. You didn't just leave me. You publicly humiliated me in the most calculated way possible. In front of our friends, our families, and the world, you weighed my worth and found it lacking. The irony is you were simply looking at the wrong ledger." She gestured with one elegant hand toward the library window. "You see that building? That's where I was happy. That's where I felt rich. My worth wasn't in a hidden trust fund. It was in the quiet, meaningful life I had built for myself on my own terms. A life you looked at and deemed insufficient." She leaned in slightly, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of the fire she now possessed, the same fire that had belonged to her grandfather. "And then the moment you discovered your catastrophic error in judgment, you didn't apologize. You didn't repent. You and your mistress tried to destroy me. You attacked my competence, my character. And then you committed the one unforgivable sin. You desecrated the memory of my parents. You did that, Sebastian. Not a businessman protecting his assets. Not a tycoon fighting a war. a cruel man lashing out because his ego was bruised. The truth of her words hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had no defense. There was nothing to say. She was right on every count. "The red file," she said, confirming his deepest suspicion without a trace of triumph. "We had that information long before the wedding. My grandfather believes in being prepared. We never would have used it. We are not in the business of ruining people. It's messy and frankly beneath us. But you forced my hand. You declared total war on a person, not a corporation. You made it about my soul, my family's honor. So I had to show you what total war actually looked like." With a quiet grace, she opened her door. "This is where our conversation ends. Forever." "Lena, please," he begged, a last desperate plea from a drowning man. "Is there nothing left? No chance for forgiveness? For anything?" She paused at the door and looked back at him, her face unreadable. It wasn't pity he saw in her eyes, but perhaps the cold finality of a closing chapter. "The woman you loved or thought you loved was Lena Vance," she said, her voice softening just enough to make the words cut even deeper. "And the man she loved was a fantasy she built in her head. Neither of those people exist anymore. You destroyed them both that day at the altar." She stepped out of the car, and without looking back, closed the door. The quiet, solid click echoed the closing of a vault. Sebastian watched her walk away, her posture straight, her steps. Sure, a queen returning to her kingdom, leaving him stranded in the wreckage of his own making. The partition slid down, and the driver's eyes met his in the rearview mirror. "Where to, sir?" Sebastian Thorne had no answer. The question was absurd. Where does a ghost go? He had nowhere left to be, no one left to see. He had flown as close to the sun as a man could, but he had been burned not by the fire of his ambition, but by the ice of his own heartless betrayal. The checkmate was complete. He hadn't just lost the game. He had been erased from the board. In the end, Sebastian Thorne learned the hardest lesson of all true wealth is not measured in stock prices or square footage, but in character. And his was bankrupt. He had the world at his fingertips and chose a handful of dust blinded by a greed so profound he couldn't recognize a priceless treasure right in front of him. Lena Sterling didn't just reclaim her birthright. She forged a new destiny from the ashes of her heartbreak, proving that the greatest power lies not in what you inherit, but in who you choose to become. What do you think? Was Lena's revenge justified, or did she go too far? Could Sebastian ever truly be redeemed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a powerful reminder that karma, like the market, always settles its debts. If you were captivated by this tale of betrayal and ultimate justice, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a good drama and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss an update.